Hey everyone, my name's Jessie. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing my big June wrap up. So in the month of June, I read a total of 13 books. So let's look at some stats. In terms of the star ratings, I read a total of 3 5-star books, 2 4.5-star books, 4 4-star books, 1 3.5-star book, and 3 3-star books. I also had 1 DNF. In terms of the genre breakdowns, I read a total of 3 thriller/mystery books, 4 sci-fi, 1 nonfiction, 1 romance, 1 contemporary, and 3 fantasy. For the age range breakdowns, all of the books I read this month, all 13 of them, were adult. So those are the stats, and if you don't know how I do my wrap-ups every month, throughout the entire month I will leave little mini wrap-ups that have more in-depth reviews of the most recent 4 or 5 books I've read, so that the end of the month wrap-up isn't forever long. So because I've already talked about the majority of these books, I'm only going to give like a couple key words on the summary and my thoughts, and of course let you guys know what my star rating was. And then if there are any books that I haven't mentioned in a previous video, those are the ones I will go more in depth on in this video. So let's just get right into it. I'm going to start with my DNF. I have not mentioned this in a previous video, and that DNF was Burn by Patrick Ness. I am shocked that I DNF'd this because it was one of my most anticipated releases of the entire year. You guys know I love Patrick Ness and the Chaos Walking trilogy. I love A Monster Calls. So I was so excited when he announced he was doing a fantasy with dragons. And the problem for me is I think I just discovered something about myself as a reader while I was reading this book. I got about 30% of the way through and I realized that this is very much it feels like a historical fiction YA book, but with dragons in it. And I found out that I don't like drastic fantasy elements thrown into what feels like a YA contemporary book. And it's not even magical realism, because I don't think dragons are like just magical realism. I think dragons are like full-on fantasy. And if you're gonna include dragons in your story, I want to see the dragons in a fantasy world. I don't want to see how our society as it stands today would revolve and react around dragons. It just wasn't that interesting to me. I wasn't liking the direction of the plot at all. Maybe I will give this a second chance and read it physically, because I was listening to the audiobook, and while I really liked the narrator for the audiobook, I just was not connecting to the story or any of the characters at all, because it just wasn't what I really wanted. Like, I wanted a full-on fantasy book with dragons, and granted, I should have known this going into this book, that it wasn't going to be that. It says it very clearly on the back and in the synopsis. It is about the US in like the 1950s with dragons. And in my mind, that sounded cool, but then when I was reading it, I just didn't like it. So maybe I'll give this another chance, but for now, I DNF'd it, and I'm not gonna give it a star rating because I only got like 30 to 40% of the way through. Now let's move into some of the books I finished. So in chronological order, these are all books that I've already mentioned in a previous video, so I will leave those videos linked down below, and I'm just gonna give you like a couple words for keywords. So the first book I finished this month was The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. I gave this 4 stars. Spooky, ghostly thrillers about unwanted children, 2 timelines, fun imagery, but I wanted more spooky scenes, if that makes sense. Next book I read was Armada by Ernest Cline. 80s inspired sci-fi adventure story about a video game and an alien invasion that becomes reality. Fun, however, didn't feel original, and none of the characters were great, but it was still a fun ride, and I gave this book 3 stars. Next book I read was White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. I gave this book 5 stars. Really important read. Foundation of learning about racism and how to combat racism. Makes you want to learn and take more action. Highly recommend, and I will be reading more on the topic. The next book I read was Waking Gods by Sylvain Neuvel. Political, sci-fi, thriller, aliens. Gave it 5 stars. Audiobook's amazing. Love the format told in this case file style. Love. The next book I read was Artemis by Andy Weir, and I gave this book 4 stars. It is a sci-fi kind of adventure, thrilling story. Moon colony, main character is a thief, tries to perform this heist. It goes wrong. So much fun. If you love The Martian, you'll really enjoy this. I loved the characters and the writing style. Very fun. The next book I read was Beach Read by Emily Henry. I gave this 4.5 stars. 2 authors. One writes in literary fiction, one writes in romance. They swap genres to sell a new book. Romance ensues. So cute, so beachy, perfect for the summer. I loved this. The next book I read was The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. This is a summer camp, thrilling mystery novel. 2 timelines, secrets, and very atmospheric writing is at the forefront. I loved the final twist. So much fun. I do recommend this. Next book I read was The Kings of the Wyld by Nicholas Eames, which was Shelf Space June pick for the book club. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. The characters and the humor were so much fun. The world building was lacking. This is about a group of former warriors getting the band back together again to go save one of their daughters, and they are past their prime. They are achy and old, but they do it anyway, and it's really fun. The next book I read was Grey Sister. I gave this 4.5 stars. This is the sequel to Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. I loved this. This is an assassin nun story. The characters are so awesome. The first half of this book was a little bit slower, but the last half of this book rocked my world. I loved it so much. Can't recommend it enough. Even if you don't love Red Sister, please give Grey Sister a shot because, wow, the stakes are raised. So good. And then the final book that I've already talked about in a previous video was My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Frederick Bachman. I gave this 3.5 stars. Sweet story about a little girl whose grandmother passes away, and she has to deliver these letters from her grandmother to her grandmother's old friends, and through that journey of delivering these letters, she discovers more about herself and about the people around her and life in general. It's just very sweet, but I did find this very slow. I didn't connect to it quite as much as I wanted to, but I probably will give this another shot, and I do recommend Frederick Bachman's writing in general. It's very good. All right, so now let's talk about some books that I haven't previously discussed in videos, so I'll go a little more in depth for these. And the first is And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I have this Barnes & Noble edition of the book, which I love this edition. I think it's so cool. I gave this book 5 stars. I feel like everyone knows what And Then There Were None is about, but essentially, I like to think of it, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Saw. It's really like gory and a horror movie for sure, but I love that movie, and this kind of reminded me of like a gentler Saw, where these people are invited to this, what they think is a party on this island. Slowly, these people are dying and they don't know who the killer is, and they're trying to figure it out because they think it's one of them. And it is really fun because you find out kind of the backgrounds of each of these characters and maybe why they're on this island, which is why I say the Saw reference. But this is not like a horror book at all. I don't want to scare anyone away from this book because I'm comparing it to Saw. This is not horror. It's not gory. It was just a lot of fun. It was very cozy. That's what Agatha Christie's novels are to me. They're just very cozy mysteries that you can just curl up with on your couch and just enjoy from start to finish. I love her writing style so much. I was so confused the whole time because I just could not figure it out, and the ending was just awesome. It blew me away, and she did it again. She got me again because she got me for, I've read Murder on the Orient Express, and I also had no idea what the ending would be for that one, so she continues to surprise me and thrill me, and I love her stories, so I'm definitely going to continue on with more Agatha Christie. The next book I read was Stormdancer by Jay Kristoff. This one was interesting. So I still don't quite know if it's young adult or adult. I thought it was adult going into it. I can see the argument either way for either of the genres. I think it's more young adult just because the protagonist is younger, but whatever, that doesn't matter. So this is a Japanese steampunk inspired fantasy story about this girl who is tasked with this mission by the emperor to go and capture a lightning tiger. And these are creatures that only exist in myth and lore, and none of the people on this mission actually believe that this thunder tiger is real. Kind of follows the story from there. I don't want to say too much in case you do want to read it. I liked it, but I also saw a lot of faults with it. The first thing that really stood out to me was the first 100 pages of this book. Almost nothing happens. Like, it takes a really long time for the story to actually begin, because what J. Kristoff does is he kind of just spews world building out at you, and the way he does it is just saying any and every Japanese word or reference that he can think of. And while I definitely appreciated the references, of course, to Japanese culture, because I lived in Japan, I loved it there, I loved it so much, it came off very confusing. Like, I can see how if someone had no prior knowledge of any type of Japanese culture or words or anything like that, they would be very confused, because he really doesn't do a good job of explaining what each of these different things means, at least in terms of this fantasy world. And then I can see the opposite, where if you are super aware of Japanese culture and the language, you would also kind of be thrown off, because I think he gets some of the stuff wrong. So it's almost like you have to have this happy balance of knowing just enough about Japanese culture, but not too much, because you'll notice there's inaccuracies. So I thought that was a little off, and it's most noticeable in the first 100 pages, where he's just spewing world building facts at you. It's like info dumps galore. And then it kind of gets into the story, and that takes a backseat a little bit. But I wasn't crazy about the world building, and I was shocked, because I thought I would love it. I thought that would be my favorite part of this book, would be the Japanese inspired world building and the steampunk elements tied in. Now, I did find it really unique. I mean, some of the stuff that he described was really fun. Like, some of the stuff, there were these weapons that were chainsaw katanas, which, like, what is that? So you can definitely see how he had a lot of fun and unique elements, combining the Japanese inspired fantasy world with a lot of the steampunk elements. So I did like that. I could tell this was kind of his first published series, because his world building, it was lacking for sure. But I will say, once the story did finally get started and you got past like the first 100 pages, the actual story was really cute, and I really liked the Thunder Tiger character in this book. I don't want to say too much, I don't want to spoil anything, but that was definitely the shining light of this book, was that character that gets introduced. So overall, I gave this book 3 stars, because while I found it unique and I eventually started to like the story and the direction, I didn't love the world building. I didn't really love any of the characters. Like, the main character of Yukiko was a good character, but I wanted her to be like darker. And maybe it's because this is young adult, and I went in assuming it was adult, so I was expecting a little bit more of a badass character, where she does come off as very young. So this wasn't what I was expecting. I don't know yet if I will continue on with the series. I'm going to ask you guys, if any of you have read this series and you think I should continue on, let me know, because I am interested, but I just want to make sure that if I do continue on, it gets better than this book, because this is just a 3-star for me, and I don't want to like waste my time if the rest of the series is going to be 3 stars. So let me know if you finished this series. What did you think of it? Does it get better? Should I continue on? So that's Stormdancer. Overall, I don't know if I'd recommend this. I'm curious to see what other people think of this one. And the last book I read, I actually just finished it up, and that is Only Human by Sylvain Neuvel, the final book in the Themis Files series. You guys know I loved Sleeping Giants and Waking Gods. Both of them were 5 stars. This one was only 3 stars. You guys, I'm so bummed. I almost feel like I should have just stopped at Waking Gods. I'm gonna say not too much because this is the last book in the series, so I just don't want to spoil anything because I do highly recommend you still read Sleeping Giants and Waking Gods. But the problem with this one is it was missing my favorite character. And I'm not going to say anything else, but the lack of that character really took away from the story for me. I also didn't love the focus of this book. I'm trying so hard not to spoil anything. I didn't love that it focused on the daughter, and I would have liked more of the other stuff. I was being so vague. If you've read this, maybe you know what I'm talking about, but I was so disappointed with this. I mean, it was still a Themis Files book, so I did give it 3 stars because I still love like the formatting and just the story in general, I think is so cool. But man, I was so bummed with the focus of this one, and I did like the very final conclusion. I thought was really nice, but definitely my least favorite in the series. So bummed. Those were the 13 books I read in the month of June. What was your favorite book that you read in the month of June, and what was your least favorite? I'm really curious, so leave your comments down below. And did you see any books that I read that you also loved or didn't like? Let me know that as well. I can't wait to chat with you guys about books. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!